Seattle, 1998. What seemed like an ordinary night shift left scars that would never heal. A patient slipped into a coma, a medical report was quietly altered, and a single signature became a lifelong chain of guilt. 25 years later, that buried secret resurfaces, pulling an entire family into the storm of public scrutiny. When the truth finally comes to light, will trust survive? Or will everything collapse under the weight of one name? The Collins home in Seattle stirred to life with its usual morning rhythm, carrying the faint aroma of coffee and bacon. Margaret moved quickly between the kitchen and the dining table, sliding scrambled eggs onto plates while glancing at the clock. Her daughter Anna had an important interview today, and Margaret's nerves were tighter than usual. Thomas sat at the small wooden table, eyes hidden behind the newspaper perched low on his nose. He cleared his throat, sipped his coffee. Then Anna appeared in the hallway, dressed in a deep blue suit, hair neatly pulled back. At 22 she looked both grown-up and unguardedly young. "Big day, Mom," she said, grabbing a piece of toast. "I need to be at the law firm by 10. If I get in, this could change everything." Thomas folded the paper and smiled. "A Collins girl doesn't just get in, she outshines the rest." He raised his mug in a quiet toast. Laughter filled the kitchen, talk of buses and resumes, light teasing to cut the tension. But when Anna turned to check her bag, Margaret's smile stiffened. Her hand gripped the skillet so tight her knuckles went pale. She glanced at Thomas, who was still beaming at their daughter, and in that flash her face tightened with something unspoken. She covered it quickly, chirping, "Eat up, you'll be late." Sunlight slipped through the Seattle curtains, striping the table with gold. Outwardly, it was a perfect family morning. Inside, Margaret felt waves of unease she couldn't suppress. Anna set her toast down mid-bite, eyes serious. "Do you know why I chose this firm?" Margaret nodded absently, but the weight in her daughter's voice drew both her and Thomas in. "They fight for people without a voice, immigrants, workers hurt on the job, families crushed by medical bills. I don't want law to make me rich. I want law to bring justice." The air stilled. Thomas's chest swelled with pride. "That's my girl. Not chasing dollars, chasing fairness." Margaret forced a smile, repeating the word justice softly. But in her mind she heard hospital machines, saw fluorescent lights, and remembered a report that had haunted her for years. Anna's eyes burned with conviction. "I read about a case where a nurse altered medical records to protect a doctor, and the patient's family never learned the truth. That kind of thing unacceptable. I want to be the one in court saying never again." Margaret's smile froze. She lifted a plate to hide the trembling in her hand. Anna didn't notice, still wrapped in her dream. But Thomas did. He asked gently, "You okay, Margie?" She blinked, forced a thin laugh. "Just realizing our daughter's all grown up." Anna beamed, unaware that every word she spoke scraped against a wound her mother had never healed. The next morning, with Anna already at the university and Thomas lecturing on campus, Margaret sat alone in the living room. Seattle's pale light slipped through the curtains and fell across a pile of mail on the table. She flipped through envelopes, bills, flyers until one caught her eye, stamped with the blue seal of the Washington State Medical Association. She slid it open carefully. Inside was a formal letter. "We respectfully invite Margaret Collins, RN, to speak at the annual conference on medical ethics. May 15th, Seattle Convention Center." Margaret froze. The words medical ethics sliced into her like a blade, reopening an old wound. In her mind she was back in the hospital corridor of 1998, fluorescent lights buzzing coldly overhead, Dr. Gray's hand pressing a file into hers. She shoved the letter into a drawer, her fingers trembling so badly the paper cut her skin, leaving a thin red line. The sting of blood made her heartbeat quicken. The sound of Thomas's car pulling into the driveway jolted her. She pasted on a smile as he walked in, as if nothing were wrong. But the letter waited in the drawer, patient as a ticking bomb. That night the house was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of a lamp in the living room. Margaret sat with a cup of tea gone cold, pretending to read a medical journal though her eyes couldn't hold a single word. The phone buzzed. A new message lit the screen. Sender, David Miller, retired physician, her old colleague from years on the night shift. Margaret's heart slammed against her ribs as she opened it. It's time to face it. The truth doesn't stay buried. Her hand shook so violently she nearly dropped the phone. In her memory, David's stern face appeared under the harsh lights of the ER, his eyes holding everything he had witnessed. He knew. He had always known. She shot to her feet, pacing the room like a trapped animal. In her head, machines beeped, Gray's voice barked orders, and her own pen scrawled a signature across a false report. She deleted the message, but the glow of the screen still felt like a stain she couldn't erase. Shoving the phone into a drawer, she drew in a ragged breath. When Thomas poked his head out of the bedroom and asked, "Still up, Margie?" she forced a smile. "Just couldn't sleep." Her voice was calm, but in her eyes the panic had yet to fade. Monday morning, Margaret had just set a pot of coffee to brew when the phone rang. From the living room, Thomas called, "Margie, have you seen today's Seattle Times?" Her stomach lurched. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped out. Spread across the table was the front page. Unresolved death at Seattle General Hospital, 1998. The article didn't print her name, but a section of the medical report showed initials, MC beneath it. The journalist wrote, "According to internal sources, the shift in question involved nurse Margaret C., currently employed at a major Seattle hospital." Margaret's knees buckled. She dropped into a chair, scanning each word. The story recounted John Harris, a patient admitted after a car crash, left in a vegetative state for 10 years before passing away. His wife, Linda Harris, was quoted, "Our family never received clear answers. All we had were cold files." Thomas frowned. Reporters again, digging up the past. 25 years, and they still won't let go. He folded the paper, ready to set it aside. "Don't pay attention, Margie." Margaret nodded faintly, though inside it felt like something was squeezing the air from her lungs. Her fingers pressed so hard into the table's edge that the skin went white. Those initials MC seemed to glow on the page, dragging the past into the present. Anna came down the stairs, hair damp from her shower. "What's going on?" Thomas tried to wave it off, but Anna snatched the paper. She skimmed it, then looked up, startled. "Seattle General? 1998? Mom, you worked there back then, didn't you?" Margaret opened her mouth, throat dry as sand. She managed only one word. "Yes." The house fell silent. Only the ticking wall clock filled the space, each second landing heavy like a warning. That afternoon Anna came home with her face pale as paper. She dropped her bag onto the chair and stood frozen, as if she couldn't find the words to begin. From the kitchen, Margaret looked up from slicing an apple, smiling. "So? Did they invite you back for the second round?" Anna bit her lip. They turned me down." The knife in Margaret's hand stopped midair. "Turned you down? But you prepared so thoroughly." Anna nodded, her voice breaking. "One of the partners told me straight out, our family's name is tied to that medical scandal in the paper. They were worried about their firm's reputation if they hired me. Do you understand? They weren't judging me, they were judging the name Collins." The kitchen air went rigid. Margaret felt a chill climb her back, as if an invisible hand had gripped her spine. She searched for words of comfort, but her throat refused them. Anna pushed on, her voice trembling though her eyes cut sharp as glass. "I read the article. Seattle General Hospital, 1998. It said the night shift listed a nurse with initials MC. Mom, you were working there at that time, weren't you?" Margaret set the knife down, her hand unsteady. "Anna, it's complicated. Don't believe everything the papers write." "Don't believe the papers?" Anna let out a bitter laugh. "Then who am I supposed to believe? Why should my future collapse not because of me but because of your past? Why do I have to pay for a secret I never chose?" A knock sounded at the living room door, sharp against the silence. Thomas stepped in, eyes darting between them. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice tight. Anna turned toward him, her eyes brimming. "I just lost the biggest chance of my life because of a scandal. And I need to know, did Mom have anything to do with it or not?" Margaret bit down on her lip, unable to answer. In Anna's gaze, for the first time, there was not only pain but suspicion. The living room sat in silence, broken only by the steady tick of the clock. Thomas lowered himself into a chair, trying to calm the tension, but Anna stood rigid, fists clenched, her eyes locked on her mother. "I need the truth," she said, her voice sharp, each word deliberate. "Did you have anything to do with John Harris's death?" Margaret exhaled slowly, staring down at her hands. Anna, that was a long time ago. There are things you don't fully understand. I don't need to understand everything. Anna snapped. I just need to know if you ever crossed the line. Just tell me the truth once, just once. Margaret lifted her gaze, her eyes heavy with fatigue. I didn't do anything wrong. I only did my duty as a nurse. Anna gave a hollow laugh. Then why is your name in the papers? Why are law firms so afraid they shut the door on me just because of Collins? If you're innocent, why does this shadow still follow us? Thomas raised a hand, desperate to ease the clash. Anna, that's enough. Don't talk to your mother like that. No, Dad. Tears streaked down Anna's cheeks as she turned to him. Do you get it? I spent years preparing. I was right at the door of my dream, and it slammed shut because of a secret Mom keeps hiding. If she's truly innocent, she should prove it. And if she's not, then she should say it out loud. Margaret shot up from her chair. You don't understand. Medicine isn't always black and white. In an emergency room, decisions are made in seconds, and anyone can be misinterpreted. Misinterpreted? Anna shook her head, voice breaking. Weren't you the one who always told me to be honest? To stand for the truth? And now you're the one burying it. The room felt colder by the second. Thomas looked from his wife to his daughter, as if teetering over a widening chasm. He wanted to trust Margaret, but the way her eyes avoided his made that trust falter. Margaret clenched her fists, forcing her voice to stay even. Anna, I did nothing wrong. That's all I can say. Anna stepped back, her face closing off. If you won't tell me the truth, I'll find it myself. And when I do, I may not see you the same way again. With that, she turned and stormed up the stairs, her footsteps pounding against the wood. Margaret stood frozen, her heart weighted down. Thomas moved to reach for her, but she lifted a hand to stop him, as if determined to hold the pain alone. The house, once warm, now felt chilled, as though winter had seeped into the middle of a Seattle spring. On the Seattle Times website, Anna stumbled across a sidebar feature. The headline read, Linda Harris still waiting for answers after 25 years. The photo showed an older woman with silver hair and deep lines on her face, sitting on the porch of her modest home in Tacoma. Beside her rested a framed black and white picture of her late husband, John Harris. The reporter asked, after all these years, what is it that you want most? Linda looked up, her eyes heavy with grief that had never faded. My husband didn't pass away on the operating table. He lived in a coma for 10 years, and then slipped away quietly. I don't believe anyone intended harm. I believe it was the system, the pressure, mistakes made in the chaos. But for 25 years, no one at the hospital has ever stood up to explain. We only received cold, clinical letters, never an apology. She paused, tightening her grip on her hands. I'm not looking for justice as revenge. I only want the truth. I want to know what really happened in that emergency room that night. If someone made a mistake, at least admit it, so our family can have peace. The article closed with a line in bold. Linda Harris, 64, still keeps her husband's medical records in a wooden box. I'm not growing old waiting for justice, she said. I'm growing old waiting for the truth. That evening, just as Margaret finished washing the dishes, Anna's phone buzzed non-stop. Her face paled as she glanced at the screen on social media. A video was spreading like wildfire, already hitting over 10,000 shares in a few hours. The title read, Michael Harris, son of Seattle General 1998 patient speaks out. The video opened with a man in his early 30s, his face worn with strain, sitting in a modest living room. He looked directly into the camera, his voice steady but trembling with emotion. My name is Michael Harris. When I was 6, my father was in a car accident and taken to Seattle General. He survived, but remained in a coma for 10 years before he passed away. From that day forward, our family lost its anchor. My mom had to raise me alone. My childhood was lived in the shadow of that loss, without my father's laughter, without his arms to protect me. He stopped, eyes red with tears. And now I read the news, I see the name Margaret Collins, the nurse on duty that night. She may say she followed orders, she may call it a system failure. But to me, she's the face connected to the night my father never came back. A life was cut short, and for 25 years, We never received even a word of apology. Michael clenched his fists and struck the table. I don't want money. I don't need compensation. I want the public to know the truth. I want accountability. If the medical field allows people like this to keep working without consequence, then the system itself is failing us. The video ended with text across the screen. Justice for Harris Medical Truth. Within a single night, the clip had been shared tens of thousands of times, climbing the trending lists on Twitter and Facebook. The comments poured in with outrage. Truth for the Harris family. How can the system look away for so long? Margaret sat frozen in her chair, eyes locked on the glowing screen. Thomas stood behind her, resting his hand on her shoulder, but to her it felt cold as ice. Margaret sat in a small cafe near Lake Union, her knit cap pulled low to cover half her face. Outside the window, Seattle rain drizzled steadily. The bell over the door jingled, and David Miller stepped inside. He looked far older than Margaret remembered, his hair now gray, his shoulders slightly stooped. His eyes, when they found her, carried both sympathy and anger. Margaret, he said as he slid into the seat across from her, his voice deep. You know why I asked to meet? Margaret avoided his gaze. I don't want to dig up the past. David placed a copy of the Seattle Times on the table, tapping the headline with his finger. The past has already dug itself up. The community is demanding answers. And you're still silent. Margaret's hands trembled. David, I only followed orders. That night was chaos in the ER. Gray told me to sign the report. I couldn't stand up to him. David leaned in, his words sharp as a blade. No, Margaret. Tell the truth. That night, Gray overdosed the patient with opioids. I saw the chart myself. I was going to report it, but he pushed the file onto you. You were the nurse of record. Your signature was the last one. You had a choice. Margaret whispered. If I refused, I would have lost my job, maybe even my license. Anna was only 3 years old. I couldn't risk it. David clenched his fist, his eyes filled with pain. So you chose differently, you signed. You helped Gray bury his mistake. A man lost his life, and 25 years later the Harris family still doesn't know the truth. Margaret bit her lip, her vision blurring with tears. Do you think I haven't regretted it? I've heard the sound of Harris's ventilator in my dreams for years. I just never had the courage. David shook his head, speaking slowly, deliberately. I don't deny the pressure. But responsibility doesn't disappear because you stayed silent. The truth is simple, you had a choice and you chose wrong. Margaret had no words. Each sentence landed like a hammer blow. Outside, the rain kept falling, cold and relentless. Inside her chest, the old wound tore open again, forcing her to face what she had tried to bury for 25 years. Late at night in the law school library, the neon lights cast a cold glow over the silent rows of computers. Anna sat alone, her hands trembling on the keyboard. She had managed to log into the state's public records archive, a system normally reserved for final-year students. Hundreds of pages appeared on the screen, each line of text clinical and unfeeling, like cold steel. She typed in Seattle General, 1998, malpractice. The third result made her heartbeat race, Margaret Collins, RN. With a click, the report opened. A death record dated May 1998 filled the screen. At the bottom was a signature she knew by heart, her mother's. The cause of death was listed plainly: respiratory failure due to trauma complications. There was no mention of a medication error. Oh God, Anna whispered, her stomach twisting. The articles, Michael Harris's video, every piece began to line up. And then she saw more. Under related cases, another file appeared, Richard Alvarez, 2001. She hesitated, then clicked. The report read, cardiac arrest during recovery. Death not attributed to error. On the surface it looked routine, until she saw an attached addendum with handwriting, shaky but clear, signed again by Margaret Collins. Anna zoomed in. It was unmistakable, the same loops and slants she had seen on bills, birthday cards, every scrap of home life. She leaned back in her chair, breath coming fast. One case could be dismissed as misunderstanding, but two? Separated by years, both tied to her mother's signature? This was a pattern. This was truth buried. Tears spilled as she snapped her laptop shut and staggered to her feet. Childhood memories rushed in, her mother in a white uniform, leading her into church, teaching her to always choose justice. Now the words rang like cruel irony. "The trust, it's gone," she rasped before leaving the library, her figure trembling beneath Seattle's yellow streetlights. That night the rain fell steadily. In the living room the air felt heavy as lead. Anna threw a stack of photocopied reports onto the table, papers scattering. Her eyes were red, her voice shaking. "I found everything. Not just 1998. In 2001 too. You signed both. I believed in you, but you betrayed all of it." Margaret recoiled, stunned. "Anna, it's not what you think. Things were more complicated." "Complicated?" Anna cut in, her voice sharp with fury. "No, it's simple. You signed. Twice. And you stayed silent for 25 years. You taught me honesty, but what about you?" Thomas bent down, picked up a page, staring at the familiar signature. His face went pale. "My God, Margaret, this is your handwriting. Have you been lying to me for 25 years? Margaret's voice cracked. "Thomas, I didn't have a choice. If I hadn't signed, Gray would have. Don't you dare blame Gray." Thomas shouted, his hands shaking. "I trusted you. I defended you against the public, against our own daughter. And now you tell me you had no choice? You did have one, Margaret. You just chose wrong." Silence filled the room, broken only by the soft patter of rain on the windows. Anna stepped back, tears streaming. "I can't do this anymore. I don't know who you are." Margaret reached out, but Anna pulled away, grabbed her bag and rushed out. The door slammed hard, the sound echoing through the house. Thomas collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Margaret stood frozen, drained of strength. Outside, Anna's figure blurred into the rain, carrying with her the trust that had shattered beyond repair. In 1998, inside the cold ward of Seattle General, Linda Harris sat motionless at her husband's bedside. Her rough hands clutched John's unmoving fingers while the steady, mechanical rhythm of the ventilator filled the silence. Moments earlier, the doctor had delivered a merciless verdict. "He will never wake up." Linda bent down, tears soaking the pale hospital gown, whispering, "Please don't leave me and our son." But the only reply was the sound of machines breathing for him. The years that followed revolved entirely around the hospital. Every week Linda wheeled her husband down sterile hallways, clinging to hope that someday he might open his eyes, while young Michael trailed behind, his gaze fixed on the maze of tubes and wires that tied his father to life. In 2008, after 10 years suspended between life and death, John Harris finally slipped away. Michael, then 15, stood trembling at the bedside. When the tube was withdrawn, the boy broke down, burying his face into his mother's shoulder as Linda held him tight, her own tears flowing with his grief. A decade of waiting ended only in a permanent void. At the very same time across the city, another child's world unfolded in warmth. Anna Collins grew up with laughter echoing through her home. At 6, while Michael was learning to live without a father's presence, Anna was carried on her dad's back across the park, her mother walking beside them with a smile. At 15, while Michael cried at a funeral, Anna blew out birthday candles, friends singing around her as her parents showered her with gifts. Just 10 miles apart, two children lived in opposite worlds, one defined by hospital corridors and tear-stained sheets, the other by guitar music in a living room and family picnics under the misty Seattle sky. The cruel divide was that the Harris family paid with 10 years of suffering and an unanswered death, while the Collins household enjoyed happiness, never knowing that the key to the Harris tragedy lay buried beneath Margaret's signature. The next morning, the quiet Seattle neighborhood of the Collins family turned into the center of a media storm. Outside their gate, reporters crowded shoulder to shoulder, microphones raised, camera flashes firing. Headlines blared across newspapers. Nurse Collins accused of concealing patient death. Margaret peeked through the curtain, heart pounding. In the mailbox lay an envelope from the Medical Board of Washington State. Her hand shook as she opened it. Notice of hearing. Margaret Collins, RN, is required to appear and answer regarding professional misconduct linked to cases in 1998 and 2001. The bold print nearly made her drop the letter. Thomas tried to reassure her, but his own voice betrayed despair. "If they're summoning you, it means this is far beyond our control." The glass door rattled as reporters knocked loudly. "Mrs. Collins, do you have a response? Do you accept responsibility for Mr. Harris's case? Margaret buried her head against the sofa, trembling. Later that day, Anna stood before the imposing wooden doors of the state board. The engraved seal glinted in the light. Inside her chest, emotions clashed, her ideals of justice on one side, and the image of the mother who had raised her on the other. As she pushed through the swarm of journalists, one voice pierced the air. That's Collins's daughter. What do you think of your mother now? The question stabbed her. Unable to answer, Anna lowered her head and hurried inside, tears streaming down her face. In the hearing room, Margaret sat frozen before the panel of commissioners. She knew this was more than a formal inquiry. It was the moment when every choice she had buried for 25 years would finally stand before the light. The hearing room of the Washington State Medical Board was heavy with silence. On the long wooden table, stacks of files sat neatly arranged. Margaret took her place in the witness chair, fingers tightly interlaced, her eyes clouded with exhaustion. Across from her, the board's chair spoke in a measured, formal tone. Mrs. Collins, do you deny that the signatures on the records from 1998 and 2001 are yours? Margaret swallowed hard, her voice trembling. No. They're mine. A ripple of murmur spread among the reporters seated in the gallery. The attorney for the Harris family rose, holding a new packet of papers. We submit additional evidence. A copy of an internal email dated 1998. In it, Nurse Collins reported irregularities in the medication dosage. He paused, fixing his eyes on Margaret. But this report was never preserved in the official record. A wave of surprise moved through the room. One board member leaned forward, frowning. Mrs. Collins, can you explain this? Margaret drew in a shaky breath. That night, I filed a report through the hospital's internal system. I wrote clearly, patient Harris showed signs of opioid toxicity. The dosage didn't match. But by the next morning, the report had disappeared. The hospital administration called me in and said the file had been adjusted. They handed me a revised version and told me to sign. I signed it because I was afraid. Afraid of losing my job. Afraid I couldn't provide for my daughter. Anna's eyes locked on her mother, her heart reeling. The truth was no longer simple. Her mother hadn't been entirely silent, but she had yielded to pressure. The chair of the board spoke gravely. So, you were both a participant in concealment and a victim of institutional coercion. That does not erase your responsibility, but it does point to a larger systemic failure. Margaret lowered her head, tears spilling onto the polished wood before her. I'm not running away from this. I was wrong, but I was trapped, and my fear cost a family their loved one. The room fell into stillness. Anna clenched her fists, torn between anger and a sudden painful sympathy. After the hearing, the hallway of the building was packed with people. Reporters pushed forward, microphones raised, camera flashes bursting in waves. But when the noise briefly subsided, two women faced each other. Linda Harris stood tall, her lined face carrying the weight of years, her eyes red but burning with intensity. Margaret, pale and slumped, seemed crushed beneath the weight of her past. Linda's voice was hoarse yet unyielding. Mrs. Collins, 25 years ago, a mistake took my husband from me. But it wasn't just his life. That mistake stole my son's childhood. Do you understand that? Margaret's voice wavered, caught in her throat. I know. Not a single day has gone by that I've forgotten. Linda stepped closer, her eyes blazing. Michael grew up without a father. At 15, he had to stand by that hospital bed and watch the breathing tube pulled from his father. I held him while he broke down, knowing it was your signature that buried the truth. Do you think when I'm sorry is enough? Margaret trembled, tears filling her eyes. I'm not here to excuse myself. I was weak. I was wrong. But believe me, I tried. I filed a report. I did what I could, but the system erased it. And then I didn't have the courage to fight. Linda's silence stretched. Then her voice cut sharp. And what about us? Who gives Michael back a normal childhood? Who gives me back my husband? The hallway fell still. Reporters held their breath. From a distance, Anna watched, fists clenched, her gaze torn between anger and a desperate wish to shield her mother. Margaret stepped forward, bowing her head before Linda. I can't give them back. But if there is anything left I can do, I will do it. For as long as I live. Linda turned away, wiping her tears, her words cold as steel. Too late, Mrs. Collins. Far too late. The parking lot behind the building was crowded, cameras flashing and microphones thrust forward with every step. Out of the mass of people, Michael Harris suddenly pushed through, his face flushed, eyes burning with rage. He pointed straight at Margaret, his voice booming. Mrs. Collins, do you even know what you took from me? You didn't just take my father, you destroyed my childhood. You're the one who let it happen, wearing the uniform of a healer. The crowd erupted, reporters surging closer to capture every word. Anna's chest tightened. She wanted to rush forward, but her legs felt nailed to the ground. Margaret froze, her face drained of color, and then without warning broke into tears. She covered her face, her voice shaking. Michael, I don't deserve forgiveness. I was weak. I made the wrong choice. I let fear swallow me. And because of that, you lost your father, your mother lost her husband. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Her tears fell heavily, hands trembling as if begging for a chance to be heard. But Michael stepped back, fury blazing in his eyes. Sorry? For 25 years did you ever think of me, of my mother? What good is your sorry now? Margaret collapsed to her knees, her sobs mingling with the light drizzle in the air. For a moment the crowd fell silent, then split in two, one side shouting in anger, demanding justice for the Harris family, the other murmuring in uneasy sympathy at the sight of a woman crumbling under the weight of her past. Anna couldn't bear it any longer. She rushed to her mother's side, helping her up, her own eyes brimming with tears. She looked at Michael, her voice breaking. You have every right to be angry. But my mother has been dying inside from guilt every single day. Michael clenched his fists, turned away and walked off, leaving behind a suffocating void between the two families, a silence no words could ever fill. The Seattle night lay heavy with mist, streetlights casting broken reflections across the water. Alone in her dorm room, Anna sat before her laptop, replaying the clip where Michael's furious voice cut through the air, and her mother collapsed in tears. The words echoed in her mind like blades. You destroyed my childhood. I was weak, I'm sorry. She slammed the lid shut and pressed her hands to her head. For years her dream had been clear, to stand for justice, to defend those without power. Yet now justice seemed to point directly at the woman who had raised her. If she stood by Margaret, would that mean betraying everything she had studied and believed? But if she turned away, she would leave her mother to weather the storm alone. Tears slid down her face. Memories surged, her mother's hand holding hers on Sunday mornings at church, the long evenings in the library when Margaret waited patiently as she devoured book after book, the quiet voice reminding her that honesty was what made a true lawyer. And now the bitter truth, the very person who had taught her integrity was the one who had buried it. But then came other faces, Linda Harris, hair turned gray too soon from years of waiting in sterile hospital rooms. Michael, just 15, weeping beside his father's lifeless body. Justice wasn't an abstract ideal. It was their grief, their broken years, their unanswered pain. Anna bowed her head, fists clenched tight. The weight of her family's past had forced her to grow in a single night. There was no easy path forward. She knew her choice would shape not only her career as a lawyer, but the very core of who she was. In the dark, her voice cracked to a whisper. Justice and family, I have to find a way to hold on to both. The news spread quickly. The Washington State Medical Board had officially revoked Margaret Collins' license to practice as a nurse. At the press conference, the board's chair stated firmly, Mrs. Collins committed a serious breach of professional ethics. Her actions have eroded public trust in the healthcare system. Margaret listened quietly, no longer offering resistance. When a reporter asked, is she afraid of being criminally prosecuted? Her attorney responded without hesitation, under Washington malpractice law, the statute of limitations has long expired. There can be no criminal case for an incident that occurred more than 2 decades ago. The crowd murmured, some outraged, feeling justice had slipped away, others resigned, aware that the legal system has its unyielding limits. But another path remained. The Harris family filed a civil suit, seeking damages for their loss and the lasting emotional toll. The court confirmed the case would proceed, noting that the cover-up had a prolonged impact on the victims' lives. That night, in the quiet of the living room, Margaret looked at Anna and Thomas. Her voice was hoarse but steady. "I won't hide anymore. If the Harris family wants compensation, I will agree. Not to buy forgiveness, but to acknowledge that the price they paid was far too great." Anna's eyes blurred with tears. In that moment, she saw her mother differently, not as the trembling woman who had avoided the truth for years, but as someone finally willing to carry the weight of her choices, however late. A week after the hearing, Seattle was taken by surprise when headlines appeared across every outlet. Former nurse Collins establishes Harris Fund to support victims of medical misconduct. The front page of the Seattle Times carried it in bold, while local TV news led their evening broadcasts with footage of Margaret standing in a small conference room, her face drawn but her eyes steady. No longer in a nurse's uniform, she wore a plain gray sweater. Her voice was hoarse but firm. "I cannot bring back Mr. Harris's life, nor erase the childhood stolen from Michael. But I can dedicate the rest of my years to ensuring other families don't suffer the same silence they did." She announced she would cash out her retirement savings and sell part of the family's assets to launch the Harris Fund. The sum, several $100,000, was modest compared to large charities, yet for a woman who had just lost her career, it was almost everything. Public reaction was sharply divided. Some journalists called it a confession through action, framing Margaret as an example of remorse made real. Others were harsh. "No charitable fund can buy back a life." On social media, comments split in two. Some praised her courage, others dismissed it as too little too late. From the back of the room, Anna stood quietly, watching her mother bow in gratitude with each question. In the flashes of the cameras, Anna saw it clearly. Margaret was no longer running. She had chosen to face it, with nothing left but the fragments of her own hands. Late in the afternoon, the Collins home was silent, the only sound the wind slipping through the window frame. Anna walked into the living room and found her mother at the wooden table, surrounded by stacks of paperwork for the Harris Fund. Margaret looked up, her eyes weary but softening when they met her daughter's. Anna sat down, stayed quiet for a long while, then finally whispered, "You can't bring back Michael's father, but you can save others." Her voice trembled, not an accusation, not forgiveness yet, but the truth spoken after many sleepless nights. Tears filled Margaret's eyes as her trembling hand reached for Anna's. "I know, and I will spend the rest of my life doing that." Anna looked at her mother. The hurt was still there, but a faint new light had appeared. The recognition that people can fail, and also choose to stand back up. It wasn't full forgiveness, but the distance between them no longer felt like an unbridgeable gulf. The next afternoon, Margaret stepped out of the Medical Board of Washington State for the last time. In her hand was only a small handbag, her nursing license no longer inside. The press waited outside the gates, cameras and questions at the ready, but she neither hid nor bowed her head. The fading Seattle sunlight struck the pavement, catching the lines of a face worn by storms. For the first time in 25 years, Margaret felt true quiet inside her mind. No more whispers of secrets, no more midnight terrors. She drew a deep breath, the faint salt of the distant sound carried on the breeze. Among the restless crowd, Anna stood further back, watching. They didn't speak, but the look they exchanged was enough to keep a fragile thread between them. Margaret walked forward, her pace slow but steady, shoulders upright. The road ahead was uncertain, but her face was calm. An ending perhaps, or the beginning of something else. Every story, no matter how painful, carries a lesson. The journey of Margaret Collins is not just about a mistake. It is about the heavy cost of silence, the damage of fear, and the long shadow that unspoken truths can cast across generations. For 25 years, one decision made under pressure shaped not only her own life, but also the lives of others who deserved honesty. This story reminds us that integrity is not something we can postpone. The truth may hurt in the moment, but hiding it can destroy far more in the long run. At the same time, the story also shows us that redemption, though never perfect, is still possible. Margaret cannot erase the past, but by facing it, she begins to rebuild a bridge with her daughter and take responsibility for the pain caused to others. For Anna, the lesson is equally profound. Justice and compassion are not opposites, but two sides of the same coin. We all carry secrets, regrets, and moments we wish we could undo. But what truly defines us is whether we choose to confront them or continue to run away. This story asks us, if we were in their place, would we have the courage to choose truth over fear? I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done differently? Do you believe Margaret deserves forgiveness? Let's talk about it in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories that explore the human heart, its flaws, and its strength.